Hi, I'm John, and this is Dice Paper Miniatures Live Clips. These are segments pulled from my Twitch live streams. This is a way for me to cross-promote both my YouTube recorded content as well as my Twitch live streams. The kind of content you'll see on the live clips focuses on, well, the material I have over on Twitch live stream, but in bite-sized segments. Everything from miniature painting to hobby reviews and discussions, unboxings, and various industry news. It would be awesome if you could click that subscribe and notification bell for future content updates, as well as share this content. All of this helps with the YouTube algorithm. In addition to helping the YouTube channel here, it also helps bring awareness to the Twitch livestream, which is typically at least once a week, if not multiple times a week. The schedule is a work in progress, so it definitely helps to follow me on Twitch so you don't miss any of those live streams there. But if you do, that's what the live clips are for here on YouTube. And lastly, before we get into the content here for the live clip, please consider checking out the merch store over on Teespring, where I have things like t-shirts, mugs, stickers, banners, and now face masks, which are perfect for respecting the space of your fellow gamers at your local game store. Furthermore, some of these live clips I do reserve for my Patreon page, which if you haven't checked that out, I definitely encourage you to check out the Patreon, as that is just another way to help support the channel, which helps creating the content that you see here. Thank you so much. Now here is today's live clip. All right, so the other big thing I wanted to kind of check out, because it's pretty substantial, is the new Warcry starter box. We've seen some of these models before. I think initially we all thought they were just going to be new warband boxes, but they're literally the new starter set, and it's also a pretty beefy starter set for sure. Let's take a look at this video. Again, for those that are joining me maybe for the first time this evening, thank you for stopping by. We're just taking a look at the Warhammer community preview from this weekend. There were a bunch of new things added, previewed, coming out here in the next few weeks to coming months. And right now, these are the two new factions for the new Warcry box set, or starter set, if you will. And since I use these clips on my YouTube channel, I kind of shy away from playing the audio on these, just to be more YouTube friendly for copyright reasons. All right, so that was sweet, but this is the new box set. This is what the art looks like for the box. Again, there's two new factions basically representing fire and shadows. These are a preview of those models. So those two, you have the Khainite Shadowstalkers as one of the warbands, and then do they list the name? We're gonna scroll down. Yeah, Scions of the Flame. So Scions of the Flame and the Khainite Shadowstalkers. So yeah, their cloaks are kind of like living organic shadow. I kind of feel like it was inspired by what was it? The Riddick Chronicles with Vin Diesel. That particular sci-fi movie, the enemies kind of, I forget the name of those guys now, but whenever they like moved, they had like a special kind of ability where they kind of like moved quickly and they leave like this shadow trail, if you will. I kind of feel like that's what this looks like. And amazed that they could pull that off in like a physical stationary, like just a still frame in plastic. But you know, traditionally, I guess you would say, or historically, these will look kind of like the dark elf from the old world. So you could probably, you know, use these for other games possibly that use kind of dark elves, if you will, or yeah, they're just sweet models. Again, they all kind of had that living shadow kind of vibe going on. I think this is one of the models we saw initially previewed way back in either February or March, which is pretty cool. Some folks aren't super fond of the mass aesthetic, but I think it works. Yeah, that living shadow. Probably one of the coolest models in this warband is this dual wielding crossbow guy. That is by far one of the cooler poses, I think. And a good neutral pose too. Again, you could just use this if you're playing an elven or dark elf character, and you know, whether it's your RPG group, could easily work for that. Also a lot of cool bits for kit bashing as well, just in general. I really kind of misread this model at first. I thought it was more of a kind of the lower body was almost like a snake, but it's just, again, just the cloak wrapping around. It's really, really well done. So these are the Scions of the Flame. And yeah, again, I think the design team just did a fantastic job on these designs. You know, whether or not it was intentional for these to be in a starter set, don't know for sure, of course, but it worked. I think it worked out well, especially when we get down to look at the actual board and the terrain pieces, because this one's kind of a special thing. Versus, I mean, the original starter set was special too, special in the fact that it sold out really fast. Yeah, it was kind of a surprise hit. But what I like about, which we'll see here in a minute, is that they incorporate a lot of the terrain from the very first starter set, but they have a lot of new elements too, which make this feel like a whole unique thing. So this flaming samurai guy is very, very cool. I would probably be inclined to do the blade to look also like flame as far as painting it goes, but again, that's going to be up to, you know, the individual artist, if you will, or individual player that wants to paint these however they want. But that's how I think that's how I'll do it, for sure. I do think, whereas there was consistency in design for the most part across all the Shadowstalkers, some of the models in the Scions of the Flame are cool, but not. There's definitely a greater leap of like cool, solid design to just like amazing, epic design. So this is like a cool, solid design, I think. But I feel like this is one of the more epic designs for sure. This flaming axe, but almost looks like a flaming scythe, is really, really cool. It's definitely interesting how they made the living shadow more integrated into the costume design for the Shadowstalkers. Not quite so much integrating the flame into the Scions. I'd be curious to know, for those watching, maybe you know this, but I'd be curious to know, you know, are the designers, how close are they working and communicating with each other when they're doing these? Is it the same group, or are they different groups, or is it literally like one person's doing the Scions, one person's doing the Shadowstalkers? I'd be curious to know that. Because some of the flame elements are slightly integrated, but not to the level that the shadow. Not that that's a bad thing. I'd be curious, you know, the art director in me is just kind of curious about those kind of little bits of like behind the scenes information. But yeah, these are all really solid. And maybe that wasn't a fair statement. Maybe it's just a couple of what's to represent the younger characters in the warband aren't quite as over the top in their design. Like these two in particular are definitely are not nearly as involved from a design standpoint as these. This living flame guy is probably the closest to kind of the living shadow that we saw in the Shadowstalkers. Yeah, this is really well done. This is, I'm not quite sure what's going on here. This almost looks like a screw top to like a cork for a wine bottle. I'm not quite sure what that's intended to be. It's interesting, but it's kind of funky at the same time. Yeah, let's take a look at that because that's very involved design. That's pretty involved. A little more simple, but still there's a lot of design elements going on. I guess this could be argued this is one of the more simple designs within this warband, but still dynamic. This is dynamic. Simple, but dynamic as well. I feel like there's probably a lot more going on that we just can't see here because of the cloak. If it was rotated, we'd see a little bit more information for sure. Again, another dynamic pose. A little bit more reserved, but still very, very cool. So yeah, it looks like, yeah, the extremes of kind of conservative to very dynamic is not quite as much. Again, this is technically, as far as poses go, somewhat, it's not as dynamic, but it's got a very cool vibe going on, a very good brooding pose to it. So yeah, I would say if you were being super critical, these are a little, that model and this model are a little bit more on the simple side of the design, but simple side of design, but it's not bad. This is a little bit simple too, but I do like I like this kind of, I guess it's a helmet, but maybe it's a cloak. It's interesting ornamental accessory. This guy's pretty gnarly looking for sure. And again, I might modify this one. This corkscrew wine bottle top is kind of a weird aesthetic. Maybe it's just the angle. I feel like that could be a blade, or that whole thing could just be a flaming top. And this guy's just, I mean, he's rad for sure. I'll be curious what like helmet or head options are available in this warband, if there's too many variations or not. And this guy, of course, is just sweet. But I do think I'd paint that blade to be more of a fiery blade. I say that for now, but who knows what I'll do in the end. All right, so as I mentioned, what's really cool about this terrain, and I didn't pick up on this at first. I actually thought this was it, but this is half of it. So this board is dual-sided, and basically this is the underground of the city, if you will, of the zone. I don't want to say world per se, but I guess at the world of Warcry, we have a top and a subterranean, so, or surface and subterranean. So this is the subterranean, the hellscape, if you will. So it felt like when I just saw this, I'm like, well, this is cool, but it feels like it might be a little light on terrain, and it also made me think it's really flat. Is this like, did they change the rules somewhat, like almost like an arena version of Necromunda? But it sounds like, I don't think that's a thing at all. It's just trying to represent like the dungeon. It's got kind of some folks mentioned, I think is it Hero Quest? Kind of has like a Hero Quest vibe to it, or Dungeon Quest even. And then let's see here. So that's, we get a little bit of a close-up. They kind of allude to, you could make this subterranean multi-tiered or multi-leveled, which is cool. But as I mentioned, it's a double-sided board. So this is the other side of the board. And some of these terrain elements are from the original box set, the original starter set. So it's really cool that you could decide to play on the surface or underground. Once I saw that, I thought they were just alluding to the fact that these warbands could be, you know, what they look like with the original terrain. But no, this is really, that's probably just being kind of dumb on my part. But you get both options. You get the terrain for the surface and the terrain for underground or the dungeon setting, which I think is really cool. Considering there's bridges here, there's got to be rules for this type of terrain for the flame or lava. I don't recall that being in the book, but in the original starter book, but it must be for sure in this new starter set. Yeah, so that's it for the terrain. For those that are just maybe joining on for this evening, I'm just going over the Warhammer community preview announcements from this last weekend. The stuff that really I really wanted to focus on this evening was the Necromunda and the Warcry stuff in particular. That was the stuff that I really tend to play a lot. But there was, like I showed earlier, there was some 30k announcements, there was some Warhammer 40k announcements, all cool stuff. But the real shining newness, if you will, was the Necromunda expansion for the Orlok house or Orlok gang, the House of Iron, and then this new the new starter set for Warcry. A lot of folks have been, depending on where you lived, the Warcry starter set basically sold out like instantly. There were shops in my local area that there actually might still be one or two floating out there, but the hobby store that I go to regularly, yeah, it sold out like instantly. So this is real cool that we have a new option for those that want to get in to the game and have some terrain that's specific for Warcry.